He was the satrap who dared to defy a king, the traitor who betrayed one master and thought he could outwit another. In the chaos after Darius' fall, Bessus crowned himself ruler of Persia, but in the shadow of Alexander the Great, ambition was a death sentence. This is the true story of a man who gambled with empires, only to face a justice so brutal it would echo through history. Bactria, 329 BC. A man is dragged through the dusty streets of a conquered city, his hands tied behind his back, his face battered and swollen from days of torture. The crowd gathers, whispering and pointing, eager to see the end of a traitor. His name is Bessus, once the powerful satrap of the Persian Empire, and ruler over vast lands, and a man who dared to crown himself the heir of Darius III after murdering the king in cold blood. Now, by direct order of Alexander the Great, Bessus faces one of the cruelest punishments known to the ancient world. He will be impaled alive. A death so slow and excruciating it could last for days. How did a man who once commanded entire provinces and dreamed of ruling the Persian Empire end up bound, bloodied, and condemned to such a fate? To answer that, we must go back to 336 BC when Alexander began his legendary march against Persia. At just 20 years old, the young Macedonian king had unified Greece under his rule and now led an army of around 35,000 men eastward, determined to bring down the greatest empire the world had seen. Bessus, whose full name was Artaxerxes Bessus, was among the most influential figures in Persia. As satrap of Bactria, he controlled a key province spanning parts of present-day Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. His authority placed him among the empire's elite, a man used to wealth, privilege, and absolute power over millions. Around 40 years old, when Alexander's campaign began, Bessus was described by chroniclers as tall and commanding, with the dark beard of Persian nobility and sharp eyes that revealed both cunning and boundless ambition. He had served King Darius III loyally in the early years of the war, leading Bactrian forces at the Great Battle of Gaugamela near Arbela. But as Alexander swept through Persian lands with one victory after another, Darius's grip on his empire began to crumble. In 331 BC, after the crushing defeat at Gaugamela, the Persian king fled east, abandoning his capitals and his treasures. During this desperate retreat, the bonds between Darius and his satraps began to fracture. Bessus, like many high-ranking nobles, started to doubt his king's ability to lead. Once seen as untouchable, Darius was now a fugitive, retreating before a much younger opponent and surrendering province after province without mounting an effective defense. For an ambitious man like Bessus, the king's weakness was more than just a national disgrace. It was an opening. When Bessus's envoys reached the Macedonian camp, they carried Darius's severed head in an ornate box, expecting it to be welcomed as a trophy. Instead, Alexander's reaction was one of fury, not gratitude. To Alexander, Darius had been more than an opponent. He had been a legitimate king and a worthy rival. The thought that such a man had been struck down not in battle, but by the treachery of his own subjects, was intolerable. In his eyes, it was an act of cowardice and dishonor. The young conqueror immediately ordered the execution of Bessus's emissaries. He swore before his army that the assassin of Darius would be hunted to the ends of the earth and made to pay in full. Darius's head was treated with the respect of royalty and laid to rest in a proper burial. Over the grave, Alexander vowed to avenge the fallen king against those who had betrayed him. From that moment in 330 BC, Bessus went from a self-proclaimed kin to the most wanted man in the known world. Rather than winning Alexander's favor, he had become his most hated enemy. Alexander put other campaigns on hold, diverting immense resources toward Bessus's capture. Realizing too late the magnitude of his mistake, Bessus fled to his homeland of Bactria, trusting its vast distances and rugged mountains to shield him from Macedonian pursuit. He still commanded significant forces and counted on the loyalty of local tribes, long resistant to foreign conquerors. For months, stretching from late 330 to early 329 BC, Bessus managed to evade capture. He waged a guerrilla war, striking at isolated Macedonian detachments then melting away into the highlands. For a time it seemed he might hold out indefinitely, but Alexander was relentless. He built a network of informants among the locals, offering lavish rewards for any information that could lead to Bessus's capture. Villages that sheltered the fugitive were destroyed without mercy. The pressure mounted, and one by one, Bessus's allies abandoned him. The final blow came in 329 BC. Spitamenes, a prominent Bactrian noble and one of Bessus's last supporters, decided to save himself by turning traitor. During a banquet, he drugged Bessus's wine, bound him while he was unconscious, and handed him over to the Macedonians in exchange for a full pardon. When Bessus was brought before Alexander, ancient sources describe the scene as one of the most tense encounters of the Macedonian campaigns. Alexander, now 27 and a veteran of countless battles, studied the man who had been his enemy for years. Bessus, though defeated and bound, remained outwardly proud. He claimed he had killed Darius not out of malice, but to spare the Persian Empire from the total humiliation of capture. During the harsh winter of 331 to 330 BC, whispers of betrayal began to take form. Bessus aligned himself with other powerful but discontented satraps, including Nabarzans, the court's chiliarch, and Barcentus, satrap of Arachosia. Together, they devised a bold and ruthless plan to assassinate Darius III and present his severed head to Alexander the Great, hoping such a gift would guarantee them a place of favor in the new world order that seemed inevitable. The opportunity came in 330 BC on a desolate road near the city of Hecatompylos. Darius, worn down by months of flight and the crushing weight of defeat, rested in his royal carriage. Bessus and his co-conspirators approached under the guise of counsel. According to later accounts, they urged the king to surrender himself to Alexander, promising mercy. When Darius refused, proud even in his downfall, Bessus gave the order. The king was struck down, mortally wounded, and abandoned in the dust to die. Darius's final moments were slow and agonizing, his last breath carrying a curse upon those who betrayed him. Bessus, however, felt triumphant. Without hesitation, he declared himself the rightful heir to the Persian throne, taking the royal name Artaxerxes V, and demanded the loyalty of the remaining Persian troops. His first royal command was grisly. Darius's head was to be preserved in salt and delivered to Alexander as a sign of his supposed loyalty to the Macedonian conqueror. But in this, Bessus revealed his greatest miscalculation. He had no understanding of Alexander's character. Alexander listened without a word, his expression unreadable. When Bessus finished, the king gave his judgment. The sentence would be carried out in the most degrading and agonizing way possible: live impalement. This method, used by some peoples of the region but regarded by the Greeks as a mark of savagery, involved driving a sharpened stake through the body, leaving the victim to die slowly. Death could take hours, even days, as the stake pierced vital organs bit by bit. The execution was set for the next morning. On a hill overlooking the Macedonian camp, Alexander ordered that every local inhabitant be summoned to watch. This would not be a private act of vengeance. It would be a public warning to all who might dream of betraying their king and defying the power of Macedonia. At dawn, Bessus was brought to the site. His wrists were bound, his face pale and gaunt from days of confinement and relentless interrogation. The stake stood ready, its point honed to a cruel sharpness. Around it, seasoned executioners waited for the signal. The hillside swarmed with spectators, the entire Macedonian army, their armor glinting under the sun, and thousands of locals gathered in tense silence. Before the sentence was carried out, Alexander stepped forward. His voice carried over the crowd as he recounted Bessus's crimes: the betrayal and murder of Darius, the false claim to the Persian throne, the arrogance of thinking treachery could buy favor. He reminded them that even enemies should fall honorably on the battlefield, not by the hands of those sworn to protect them. To kill one's king, he declared, was an affront to the gods themselves. Then came the order. At midday, the executioners forced Bessus to straddle the base of the stake. Following the old Persian method, Was sharpened wood was driven upward through his body, piercing flesh and muscle in a slow, merciless advance. The air was filled with the sounds of the crowd, some silent, some murmuring, others turning away, as the man who had once ruled provinces and dreamed of empires was left to die, suspended between earth and sky. The intent was clear, to make Bessus's death as slow and agonizing as possible. A living warning to anyone else who might consider betrayal. Ancient accounts say he remained conscious for hours after the stake pierced his body, alternating between raw screams and unsettling, silent endurance. Alexander stood by for the entire ordeal, watching without expression as the man who had been his most stubborn adversary writhed before him. Bessus's life finally ended on the second day. His body gave way under the combined toll of blood loss, shock, and infection. With his death, the last organized resistance to Macedonian rule in the region collapsed, and Alexander could claim his vengeance was complete. But the punishment did not end there. Bessus's corpse was left impaled for a full week, a grim spectacle meant to burn the memory of his fate into the minds of all who saw it. Over time, the story of his execution became legend, told and retold across generations as a stark example of what awaited traitors to their king. For Alexander, however, the episode marked a shift. Ancient historians note that after Bessus's death, the young conqueror grew harsher and more suspicious, particularly toward his own generals. His obsession with revenge had exposed a darker side of his nature, one that would only deepen as his empire expanded. Ironically, the brutal execution did not bring him the satisfaction he might have expected. In the years that followed, rebellions and betrayals would rise again, teaching him that fear could command obedience for a time, but could not guarantee lasting loyalty in an empire so vast and diverse. Bessus's fate remains a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far. Once a man of immense wealth and authority, he met one of the most horrific deaths of the ancient world because he overplayed a political gamble without grasping its consequences. More than 2,000 years later, his end still stands as one of history's most extreme examples of royal justice. It reveals both the unyielding nature of absolute power and the perils of underestimating rulers like Alexander, who saw treason as the ultimate, unforgivable crime. When we study the conquests of Alexander the Great, it is easy to focus on the brilliance of his military victories. Yet the story of Bessus reminds us that his greatness was shadowed by a capacity for cruelty, just as formidable as his strategy. His death remains a grim monument to an age when power was enforced through fear, and treachery was answered with punishments that tested the limits of human endurance. If you'd like, I can now merge all your rewritten parts into one seamless, polished historical script so it reads like a professional documentary narration from start to finish. That way, the entire Bessus arc flows perfectly.